him in the same way that other people.
Hey everybody, as you're coming in, please pop into the chat and say hello, introduce yourself, and we'll get started in a minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. It's our 7th week into quarantine. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to get started with our update. Just so everyone knows, before we get started, we do have closed captioning today. So if you would like to use that, there should be a CC button at the bottom, so you're able to access those closed captioning. Let us know if you have any questions during our meeting today. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function. We'll be sure to answer those questions as we move along. We will have a Q&A section towards the end of the meeting, around the last 15 to 20 minutes. So if you want to hold your questions till then, that's fine as well. We do ask that you make sure to mute yourself just in case any feedback is happening while we're in the call. And we'll get started with the first slide and bring it to Cara for an update about the City of Boston and COVID-19.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I'll just say I'm having some extra feelings right now because I just found out that Great Scott in Alston is not going to reopen. And for those who don't know me very well, I came up in a small venue kind of community art space, and so hearing that is kind of close to home in terms of the impacts that I'm sure we're going to start to see. And for those who don't know, Great Scott is a small kind of music venue in Alston. It's been around for over 40 years, I think 44 years. So that's tough, and tough to start thinking about those kinds of realities. In addition to everything else, there are now over 9,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Boston. 2,000 of those have fully recovered, and we've seen 357 deaths. We are seeing the effects of trying to flatten the curve through social distancing, wearing masks, all of the efforts that everyone's making. I said that last week, and it's still true this week. We also had some news about the extension of the statewide stay-at-home advisory and essential services order. So originally the dates on these were May 4th. That's now been extended to May 18th, and that includes the stay-at-home order, the ban on gatherings over 10 people, and the ban on non-essential businesses. The state has also convened a reopening advisory board, and I believe Emily is going to speak to that a little bit more in her statewide update. You can go to the next slide. And for a more in-depth public health update today, especially on testing, we're going to pass it over to Leslie from the Health Commission.
Thank you. Again, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I wanted everyone to know that the City of Boston has been working really hard to expand testing to all our citizens with the support of the Boston Resiliency Fund. We're hoping to increase 3 more community health centers. That includes Fenway Health in the Fenway neighborhood, Driscoll Neponset Health Center in Dorchester, and Charles River Community Health Center in Brighton. And once those become active, that's going to bring up our testing sites to 19. And again, that's all across the city of Boston. And if you're interested in find out where these sites are, where they're located, please go to the boston.gov website /coronavirus, or you can go to the BPHC website where we also have that information too. I do want to stress to individuals that if they are interested in getting tested, don't just go to the testing sites. Call ahead. It's very important to always call ahead because there's different requirements that they may have. Some of them require a PCP referral. Others, they will just do a screening and then they'll test you. But again, they'll tell you exactly at what time they want you to show up so you don't end up having to wait. So again, just stressing to everybody before you head out to a testing site, please call ahead. The city again continues to conduct universal testing for all our homeless population in the city. So this has been great. It's amazing all the work that everyone has done. It's so important for us to really know how our homeless population is doing, and we've been really trying to improve where they're staying. So we've been adding shelter spaces, and we continue to work hard on this. Another update is regarding the antibody testing that has been occurring. As many of you may have heard, last weekend we had sent out invitations to 1,000 residents in 3 different neighborhoods to participate in this antibody study. So it's underway. We hope to complete it by Monday of the following week. So fingers crossed that's going to happen. Participants, again, they were tested for the presence of antibodies as well as for the COVID virus itself. And the data, again, is we're hoping that it will provide a snapshot of how prevalent the outbreak is in particular zip codes. And again, this is going to be really important to really understand how the virus is spreading. And again, the mayor is thanking residents for their willingness to participate. And we have received many emails, people asking to volunteer to participate. But again, like this particular cohort was chosen randomly, and maybe moving forward, we could offer it again. But at this point, we're not accepting any volunteers for this particular study. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Does anyone have any questions in the chat just about the testing or the antibody testing? I know that's news this week. And feel free to add questions as you get them, and we'll also answer them at the end of the hour. Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to provide an update on food access. Food access has been a huge priority during this whole crisis, and there are now 65 youth-oriented meal pickup sites. Some of those sites have also been expanded to be able to serve adults. I also want to give a big thank you and some recognition to the ICA for figuring out how to mobilize some of their own assets in this time to support food access and distribution. We can throw a link to this article if folks haven't seen it yet. But there's been this great connection made between the watershed and the expansion to the watershed building in East Boston and kind of the community that building is in. So I wanted to give them a quick shout out, and I will throw this in the chat in case you haven't had a chance to read that story. And then we can go to the next slide. Also a quick update on youth engagement and virtual learning. The city is continuing to distribute Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots to get families online and connected to BPS. And internet and wireless providers are suspending cutoffs and late fees to help address internet access issues. So given that we are looking at a virtual school year and probably part of a virtual summer, we're going to reconvene the conversation on virtual learning for arts education and creative youth development with PPS investors, Mass Cultural Council, and others. So the next call for that will be Monday, May 11th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. And we'll be sure to send out a link and reminder and a registration link as soon as we have it. Before we go to the summer jobs update, I just want to point out these photos here on the right are from the MFA. Another big thank you and shout out to them for figuring out how to put together some packages for delivery to families and to young people so that there could be some supplies and arts and crafts and activities for our youth and families to do. So that was another above and beyond effort that I wanted to highlight. Big thank you for those donations as well. And now to talk about summer jobs, do we have Midori?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you. My name is Midori Morikawa. I'm the Director of Business Strategy for the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Great to see so many faces. I recognize few people, but I don't know most people, so nice to meet you all. So as many of you know, every summer the mayor, one of his signature program is the Youth Summer Employment Program, where over 10,000 young people are employed in various industries and jobs across Boston, right? Hospitals, finance, nonprofits, summer camps, you name it, just a whole gamut of young people. They're engaged in paid opportunities. So as you know, due to the impact of COVID-19, we are expected to lose some of those jobs, especially in the healthcare setting, for some summer camps, for day camps. I know some have already said that they will not be operating this summer on that. So, we're trying to identify opportunities for young people because the need is there. A lot of these young people depend on the paycheck that they get every summer, especially now with this economics to support themselves and their families. So what I'm set out to do is to identify as many opportunities as possible from our partners. To see if you have any jobs for young people, or if you have anything creative, because this is a creative group, to supplement some of the work, right? So on average, youth are engaged in jobs for 25 hours a week for 6 weeks, starting from July 6th to August 14th. If you have I'm happy to do a virtual tour of of my museum or whatever. And we can supply 3 hours, or if you have some other opportunities for these young people with big, small, anywhere in the middle, we will love to know and we will love to hear from you on that because every job will count and every engagement will count. And we want to make sure that these young people are staying engaged and there's no learning loss over the summer. So if you have any follow-ups, questions, I think Pascal from Austin Culture will be the lead person taking all that questions. And I'm here if you want to talk things through, if you're not sure, but if you want to know if whatever you're offering would be a good fit for young people, they're age 14 to 21, please reach out and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Midori. And Pascal, maybe you can throw your email in the chat.
Yep.
If anybody has ideas or anything out of the box while things are online, if there's a program you're able to adapt that you normally would have done, just please let us know and we'll help put together a list for our economic development office. Okay, great. Thank you. There's Pascal's email. Great. Yes, I know folks are going to be doing that. Veronica Robles, Selena from High Square Task Force. And I think I'll just put another plug as we're figuring out how to ensure that murals can move forward during social distancing, which is something that we're just getting the details sorted right now. Those could also be really great youth employment opportunities. So if there's a project, anything outside, beautification, murals, something like that that you think you could do, please let us know about that as well. Okay. Great. We can go to the next slide. So just a couple housekeeping things. We are going to aim to end this call early by 4, not the full hour and a half, so that you have time before 5 p.m. today to complete this survey for your organization. Thanks to everybody who has done it already. Super, super helpful. We just want to make sure we capture everyone. So we can paste this link in the chat, and just, if you can get it in before the end of the day today, it's just very, very, very appreciated. Next slide. And then I want to plug for next week. We're really excited to be having the ART on the call next week to talk about this initiative that was just announced. Probably everyone on this call saw this announcement. This is a partnership between the ART and Harvard School of Public Health to create a roadmap to recovery and resilience for theater that's going to use the ART's planning and activities as a case study for the field. So I know that there's already a lot of buzz about this, and we're really eager to learn from this project and follow it and share more of that information with you. So we do anticipate using most of our meeting next week to talk about this and have enough time for Q&A with the ART. And I'm also assuming that there's going to be some maybe adjacent industries or organizations or higher ed that might want to hear and learn from that as well. So as part of setting up the meeting for next Friday, you're going to see that there's a new Zoom link from us that does ask you to just register with your name and email, so that we can make sure that we're actually getting the information back out to everyone after the call. So we'll update the calendar invite, you'll see it in an email, and we'll update the link on the website, but just be on the lookout for that. And I think that is it from me. The next slide. Yes, I will pass it over to to
Thank you, Cara. Good afternoon, all. I am so excited for that session next week. Thank you to the folks from ART who are on this call, and Cara for coordinating that. So really quickly, it's sort of a light week in terms of legislative work, either in Congress and then also on the state level. So they're working on a 4th stimulus bill. We understand right now, or 2 days ago, Pelosi announced that she had successfully managed to include relief funds to states and municipalities. Obviously, that's something that we are very, very excited about, because we know how much revenues are down on both state and local levels. So that additional assistance from the feds is important in that next bill. I will also say that one of the probably main architects of that bill is the chair of Ways and Means for the House, which just happens to be Congressman Richard Neal, who represents the western part of the state. So that is a good thing. And if any of you have connections out in Western Mass, it's always nice to reach out to your member of Congress and let them know you are thanking them for their work and that the creative community is in trouble right now and could use some assistance. So then I want to talk a little bit about what's happening on the state level. So on the House side, they have spent the week trying to figure out how to set up remote legislative sessions. So right now they're in informal session, which means they only need a handful of House reps to be there. They can use social distancing requirements in order to do that. But it also means that at any time, any member of the House could call for a quorum vote, and it would immediately stop that particular session. And so they couldn't do additional work. They usually, as a result, they don't usually do big bills at those sessions. They kind of do like the day-to-day processing. What they're trying to do is figure out a way to legally have remote voting and remote sessions happen. And it seems as though every time they get close, there's a member of the House who objects. And so they are working on it. Speaker DeLeo says he's going to take it up at the beginning of next week. But once that's put in place, we expect and anticipate to see a lot more movement. On the Senate side, they seem to have figured out how they want to do their remote sessions. And Senate President Spilka announced 2 days ago that she is focused on not just doing COVID-19 relief and recovery, but also continuing to work on bills that they had set up prior to the outbreak of COVID-19 in Massachusetts. This includes a mental health access bill that would expand access to mental health services across the Commonwealth. I think especially in light of COVID-19, this is an especially important piece of legislation to monitor and look at, and then a transportation bill. So we're sort of seeing things start to move again, and we're paying attention to that. But more importantly, and I'm going to go out of order from what my slide says, sorry. So the Mass Cultural Council announced earlier this week what they are going to do with their CARES Act NEA allocation. So the NEA got $75 million from the CARES Act, which 40% of that was redistributed to states and regional arts service organizations like NEFA here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts and the Mass Cultural Council received $475,300 of that, and they will be funding 74 creative youth development organizations in Massachusetts. Obviously, there is $475,000 is in some ways a lot, but in other ways very little in terms of trying to distribute it equitably across the state. I frankly want to applaud, and Mass Creative wants to applaud the Mass Cultural Council supporting and protecting creative youth development organizations in this moment in time. So that is how they have decided to do that granting. That also is in addition to the Safe Harbors program that they stood up, and then the individual artist and creative worker humanist relief fund that they've stood up. So then to Governor Baker. So as Kara mentioned, he has extended the non-essential business closure through May 18th. And then he also announced this week a reopening advisory board. And this group has been tasked with submitting a report on May 18th. Oh, lots happening on May 18th about how the state would reopen, a strategy for how the state would reopen and sort of reopen its economy. The members of that, the co-chairs are Lieutenant Governor Polito and Secretary Keneally of Housing and Economic Development. And then there are 17 members who represent the medical community and then also the private sector. What's noticeably absent from that list is any representation from K through 12 education, higher education, labor, and the creative and cultural community. Somebody earlier this week asked me, does it bother you that there's no one from the cultural community? And I was like, yes, I can say yes. But that doesn't mean that it bothers me enough to not do anything. So interestingly enough, Mass Creative had been working on a letter to submit prior to the announcement of any task force to say the creative community would really like to be involved. We were able to quickly pivot that. I was about to hit send. When he made that announcement. So, my intelligence had been off about his timing. But we quickly pivoted that letter and addressed and said, thank you for your leadership, and that the creative community and cultural community continues to be a resource to inform a common sense approach to reopening in Massachusetts. I am delighted to tell you that when I hit send on the email today to Governor Baker, Lieutenant Polito, and Secretary Keneally, it had representation, it had over 600 signatures. That included, let me grab my handy dandy chart, 316 arts and cultural organizations and 339 individuals. If you add those numbers up, it gets to 655. I wasn't able to track in real time, but that's an amazing outpouring. And we put out a notice yesterday to ask for folks to sign on. And I am just incredibly impressed at the collective power of our voice. It is a 17-page long document, including signatures from our very own Cara Elliott Ortega, leaders from cultural organizations across the Commonwealth. And so to many of you on this call who in fact added your name, I sincerely appreciate it. That's not our only effort and advocacy around this. We are working some back channels. I know some of you are also working back channels, and thank you to those who have looped me into those so that we can just sort of track those. So we're doing our due diligence and follow up. For my money, we get this done when there are many advocacy voices at the table asking for the things that we need. And so I'm always pleased to hear about the individual efforts and larger collective efforts that we're all doing. So thank you for that. Okay, Cara.
Can people still add their name to this?
So at the moment we have closed it down, but we may reopen it at the beginning of next week. Apologies, my graphic design is not as good as it should be, so I'm trying to post a prettier version and be able to manage making sure that logos of organizations are included. So it seems like a silly reason, but we hope to reopen. Thanks, Cara.
Looks like we also have a question, if you're able to take one.
Do I have the time? I want to be respectful of other people's time today, but yeah, sure.
You've got yeah, go for it. You have 5 minutes.
So Colleen, I'm gonna, yep, there you go.
Thank you. Listen, I just wanted to know, Emily, if you get the proper invitation to be at that table, which I think is terrific, the pursuit of it and your response, what type of preparation would be in place so that the right questions can be asked? Specifically, I was really impressed last week in this meeting when Cara and somebody else were talking about doing communication with Seattle to find out how they are progressing in terms of putting their cultural arts community back in place. And I just hope that, I'm sure there are, but if you could just share a little bit about what kinds of things you'd be looking for support, so that because obviously all of us want to, in a safe way, but we want to be performing, and we want to be giving back, being our community again. So have there been any plans that you specifically talk about?
Yeah, Colleen, that's a really good point. And in the rush of my work this week, I did have just a beat where I was like, if one of us gets invited to the table, what exactly are we going to say? And that, I think we all have some answers. So to that end, yeah, there are some efforts. So I know that some organizations and cohorts are self-organizing to start answering these questions for themselves across the Commonwealth. That's another place where if, let me also just say this. I truly do not expect that if there's an invitation, it will be one person or it will be mass creative. In fact, I don't know that that's the right answer. I think the right answer is, how are we, Colleen, to your point, doing some self-organizing, preparing the materials that say, if we're talking about a small sized venue, here are the things we need some help figuring out. If you're saying that we have to be 6 feet apart, we'll do that on my screen. Here's how we would creatively solve that. If you're saying we have to be 10 feet apart, here's the resources and supports we're going to need until we're able to open up, because we can't do it at 10. Cara yesterday on another call, I'm going to give her a shout out for this, said part of this is also saying, listen, we are the creative sector. Tell us what you're thinking in terms of guidelines and let us creatively show you how we would do that. And I thought that was also a really great response, right? None of us are public health officials, save one of us on this call. But I'm not interested, and I don't think any of us are interested in pushing back and saying, you got to open tomorrow and we've got to, we want to people shoulder to shoulder. So Colleen, this is my long way of saying, my email is on the screen. If folks have thoughts, if folks have ideas, please let me know. If you're having conversations in cohorts or in collection around this question and have some ideas that you feel you'd like to share, please feel free to let me know. I'm working with Don Simmons at Stage Source, with Catherine Peterson at Arts Boston, with Cara, about how do we can make sure that, I think this is really important. We are a diverse sector. We all have different needs when it comes to gathering people together, and how are we making sure that we're appropriately representing that?
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Anything else, Emily? You got like 1 more minute.
The next slide is just my weekly reminder to sign up for the Health Connector. Again, this is amazing. They've extended their enrollment period. I know that many of us in our communities and our networks have seen either you've lost health insurance or you've lost income to be able to pay premiums. Don't let that stop you from getting health coverage.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. All right. We're going to move to our second half, which is the share out, and we'll start with Maurice Parent from the Front Porch Arts Collective.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. To be sure I could get into my time limit, I wrote a little something, so I'm sorry if this seems like a little bit of a lecture or something, but my name is Maurice Parent. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Front Porch Arts Collective. And a little bit of information about the Front Porch. We are a Black theater company whose mission is to advance racial equity in Boston through theater. And over the past 3 years, we have been working to build a theatrical space that celebrates the lives and narratives of people of African descent, as well as partner with strategic partners to build programs that create diversity across the entire theatrical ecosystem of Boston. We started with stage readings at our fiscal sponsors, who are Central Square Theater. And with that, we were able to build momentum. And now we are co-producing with them and other more established theater companies. And when COVID-19 hit, it found us in the middle of our second year of co-productions. They closed that made theaters close their doors. So what this meant for us specifically is not only were 2 of our shows canceled and postponed, 2 galas were canceled that we were supposed to be a part of. So obviously that's missed fundraising opportunities. But more importantly, the momentum we've been building for the past 3 years is stilted. We're small as a fiscally sponsored organization, and we're not the place where we're paying ourselves. And that's something we were hoping to strategize a way around. So we have a team of about 6 who have to do the work of building the porch brick by brick, as we like to say, as well as hold down full-time jobs. So when the shutdown happened, we were in the middle of applying for a 501c3, which would, of course, make us open to get some of those larger dollars that we could get to the point of our goal of at least giving partial salaries to ourselves. And I would say the biggest ways we've had to adapt since then is to adjust our timeline of exactly doing that, adjust our development timeline. For instance, we'd hope to, by this time next year, be able to give partial salaries, as I mentioned. We stay in constant conversations with our theatrical partners about the postponed shows and thinking of also how we can keep this momentum that we've built over the past 3 years going in a pandemic, right? So how can we build those funds that we so greatly need in order to reach our goals? So we all know that culturally specific organizations, particularly those that are led by POCs, are usually the most vulnerable in times of financial crisis. So our dilemma is, how do we build this organization and support our members who are each going through their own travails with employment, unemployment, and all the uncertainty around that? How do we build this organization and keep our dreams going, but and ask for those funds in a world where most funders and fundraisers are focusing on organizations that need the infusion of cash to stay alive? I think that's all I have. And I think I hit all the questions. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask. Did I reach my time, Pascal?
I think you're perfect. You have 2 minutes left. So
Wow.
Great. Perfect. If anyone has questions for Maurice, he'll be here for the rest of the call. So just feel free to put it in the chat and we'll ask him the questions.
I'd also like to say my co-founder, Dawn Meredith Simmons, is also on the call, so you can ask questions of either one of us.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you.
Great. We'll move to Ash from Castle of Our Skins.
Great. Hi. Thanks for holding this space, first of all, and thanks, Maurice, and everyone else on the call for doing what we're all doing, which is trying to adapt to the situation. I'm Ashley Gordon, the Artistic and Executive Director of Castle of Our Skins. We are in our 7th series. We're a concert and educational series based currently as a music ensemble in residence at the Boston Center for the Arts. And our work, our mission is really to celebrate Black artistry through music, largely classical music, and to do so by incorporating a lot of other arts, visual arts, dance, etc., into our programming. We formed out of a great need with a lack of equity and diversity within our field, which is classical music, and wanted to really amplify the voices of Black from the African diaspora creatives. As I said, we've been doing this for 7 years, starting out very small, and we are still very small, but seem bigger publicly. But the staffing has certainly maintained a really small, tight-knit unit. Similar to Maurice and to, I'm sure, all of you, all of our programming was canceled starting March 14th. I specifically remember that day, through the end of June. And while we have tried to reimagine some of those programming digitally, most of which is flat out canceled, which is obviously a loss of revenue for our artists as well as for the organization. We are usually not active in the summer, so that does buy us a little bit of time, but having conversations already for fall programming and actually spring programming to be postponed, or if not postponed, talk with our collaborators about how that could be potentially digitally scaled or downsized in a certain capacity. In addition to the programming, it's also affected us financially. Similar to Maurice, we were hoping to be able to do a matching campaign so that we could finally hire an executive director come next season. We've shifted that timeline to be able to do so and to try to actually build this team to be one that is far more self-sustaining. We, like Maurice and Front Porch, have been collecting momentum over the years, publicly and financially, and have certainly reached a bit of an impasse to be able to weather this storm. Some things from this particular pandemic that actually have been good for us is that we've been able to beef up our our digital presence. As a result of this, redesigned our website, castleskins.org, and being able to collectively hold space with lots of other small to mid-sized arts organizations and think about creatively post-COVID and even during COVID, how we can co-create, how we can continue to share resources, since we are certainly stronger together than we are individually. Similar to all of you, we've also reimagined the digital space and trying to figure out how we can beef up fundraising in that digital space to try to still maintain some kind of momentum from what we had in previous years. In addition to also talking with collaborators and presenters, both this season as well as future seasons, and certainly the ones that we've connected with over the past 7 years, to think how in this time we can again amplify each other through digital content and through programming to be able to create something that is larger than ourselves. So taking this as an advantageous opportunity to reopen some of those conversations. We are very, very small, one part-time operations manager who is still working with us through this season. And that was funded for 1 year prior to COVID. So it's great to have her on board. I, as artistic director, receive a stipend, and I have declined my stipend during this time so that I can pay more of my musicians and artists for our digital programming, which we have at this point set through the summer, be it storytime sessions or small concerts, poetry readings, etc. But we are proud to be able to pay everyone, all of our artists, for the digital programming that we're able to do through August. We've at least planned for that. It might not be their full pay rate, but we are still holding true to our mission to find the ways to be able to support our creative team, and are fortunate to have funding support, some donors that have stepped up to be able to help us do so.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash. Great. We'll move on to Betsy from the ICA.
Thanks, Pascal. Hi, I'm Betsy Gibbons from the ICA. I'm the director of teen programs there. So I'm, looking at really my little section of the ICA. And obviously it's just one of the many audiences that we work with. But the ICA closed beginning the 13th of March. And in teen programs, we kind of took a week to check in with teens and to plan, and then we started holding teen programs online the week of the 23rd. We have 8 extended teen programs, meaning they're a semester long or a school year long, and they're in different arts disciplines, so from film to creative leadership and everything in between, and they meet weekly, and the goal was really to maintain the communities we had built in person and to support each other personally and creatively. So the early weeks were just checking in as a group and continuing, in addition to those kind of individual, in addition to those group check-ins, we'd have individual check-ins with teens to just see how they were doing. We gave the teens some creative projects that they could work on during the week, as well as acknowledging some of the limits on their time and resources in this moment. They're all in very different situations in their lives right now. and just trying to support them in finding lots of options for the resources they do have available in this moment. And over the weeks, we've kind of found that more of them want to collaborate with each other in real time during the weekly sessions, and we found kind of creative ways of doing that, you know, where they can still participate even if they have limited resources or spotty internet or fun things like that. And, you know, staff are facilitating these weekly sessions and also doing these individual check-ins. We have a small but mighty staff in teen programs that we're very fortunate to have. In all of the programs, we're trying to help young people feel empowered and identify what they do have control over in this moment of great uncertainty. We know can cause anxiety for many young people as well as all people. And this was, you know, this is always a goal of creative youth development programs, but it's become especially important in this moment. And the amazing social worker that we are lucky to work with, that her goal is to kind of amplify our staff's ability to work effectively with young people. Early on in our conversations, she reminded us of the importance of just that, of helping young people think about living in this moment as opposed to trying to deal with all the things that could come up in an uncertain future. And also helping them understand like what it is that they have control over in this moment. In some of the programs, it looks like helping them identify options and choices they have in reshaping projects to match social distancing guidelines and other elements of their present circumstances. But in our leadership group, which is Teen Arts Council, it means them working with us to create content that will serve and engage the community of teens in Boston and beyond. They usually do this by creating events like teen nights, and they're like in-person events, but they're now doing it by creating virtual events and digital resources that'll be shared on our website and on our ICA Teens social media channels. And just kind of to echo what Ashley was saying, they actually immediately, one of the things they started thinking about a lot was how they could amplify others in this moment. They thought about other creative teens and how they can be a platform for their work. Thought about Boston-based artists and more. So I guess they're in the same wavelength in their creative thinking as well. The challenges and questions we're facing are very similar to those others are facing. The young people we work with, as I said, are experiencing this very differently due to variations in their living situations and household dynamics and access to resources and technology, et cetera. And so meeting all of their interests and needs in this moment is challenging, especially in group situations. We have really found one-on-one check-ins to be an essential part of our practice as educators and youth workers right now. They've been really important ways of really understanding where to set expectations and how to interact with young people and how to support them. Maintaining the communities we have built with them in person can be challenging when we only meet as a group online and have kind of limited time with them each week. We're trying to keep the sessions to an hour, though most of our programs usually run 2 to 3 hours when they meet at the ICA, because we don't want them in front of a screen for that much longer, and we want to give them time to work on other things. So we've intentionally designed projects that ask them to collaborate with each other by text or call or video call or whatever safe method they want to kind of do. They work on those during the week, and it also encourages them to continue to and be creative with each other, not just the whole group. And many of our programs allow teens to continue into the next year of the program if they will still be in high school. Some are made up primarily of teens who are new to the ICA, so different situation. So one question, I guess, that we're thinking about on our horizon as we look to summer and beyond is what are the effective ways of welcoming new people into communities or building new communities entirely online? So again, I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this work. I know a lot of people are thinking about youth engagement right now, and I will drop my contact information into the chat in case anyone does want to reach out. I'm very excited about collaborations and ways to amplify each other's work at this time, so please feel free. And I'm going to share it with the whole group now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Betsy. We did see a question in the chat from Maurice about blackout events that Front Porch has done. Maurice, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Inspired by the play Slave Play on Broadway, Jeremy Harris had a blackout on Broadway where he took a performance off sale to the general public and filled it with about 800, 900 people who identify as being part of the African diaspora, or, you know, Black folks. And inspired by that event, I was directing at Speakeasy Stage the play Choir Boy, and the Front Porch did, that was one of the programs we did this past year, was create Blackout Boston. And the whole, the ethos around the event is flipping the narrative of who's welcomed in theatrical spaces, who feels at home in theatrical spaces, and who are the majority in those spaces, right? So especially with work that is focused on narratives of the African diaspora, it's very important that the people who are on stage are mirrored off stage. And you have to be intentional around that, because we know the history and the legacy of theatrical spaces, how they can be somewhat exclusionary and unwelcome. Some people feel unwelcomed. Some people feel, particularly people of color, feel oftentimes judged and not able to react in natural ways in the theatrical space. So you have to be specific and direct about breaking down those barriers. And so we started with Choir Boy, and then we kept it going, and we did that. We worked with ART for one at Hibernian Hall for the show, What to Send Up When It Goes Down. We built one for the Pascal directed. We were all one big family on this call. Pascal directed at Greater Boston Stage for Maria and Rosetta. Then we had one for our second show of the season, the last one before the shutdown, which was Passover, again at Speakeasy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Maurice. And Ruth is sharing the link to the Arts and Education Statewide Community Conversation facilitated by National Guild. So if anybody wants to get any of that information, the link is in the chat. Awesome. Great. Now we do have the last 13 minutes open to questions. Are there any questions that people may have for any of our speakers or anybody who has spoken today on the call? Feel free to leave them in the chat and I'll read them out.
And while people are doing that, I might just insert myself because I've got a couple of questions for everybody. For Maurice and Don, and I think Ash also, talking about what it's like to be a smaller organization, having to be nimble, and the kind of co-creation, sharing of resources, amplifying each other. I think we've been hearing a lot about co-production opportunities. How are you already thinking about what some of those possibilities could be? Like, what does that look like? I think, hopefully one of the things that comes out of this moment is that we can have, 100 organizations on one call hearing from each other and have more opportunities for that kind of work. So I'm just curious if there's more that you could say about what that might look like or what that has looked like in the past for you.
Well, I can just jump in quickly and acknowledge that Arts Connect International had a really fantastic multi-day workshop, and I think Allegra was on this call, or hopefully is still on this call and can speak more about it. But to be able to have sort of back-to-back, creating a festival type of a thing. So if you, for your own particular audience, have a program, definitely being able to amplify by creating, similar with Arts Week, right? Creating a digital space where we can create one aspect of what is being consumed by a larger community.
Yeah, and thanks for that question. I think, and I'll invite my co-founder Don to chime in. Collaboration and partnership was already really important to the Front Porch. We have a bit of a Herculean task, I think, to want to build an organization focused, mission-driven on stories of the African diaspora, and also get to the place where we can pay union actors. The only way we can do that is through collaboration and partnerships. And we were able to find partners who put their money in their space where their mouth is, and saying the value of this art, the value of this organization is important, that they would partner with us. And then that was part of our adapting to the COVID-19 reality, thinking current and thinking post. We're thinking about ways that we can shift maybe our long-term goals and realizing the strength of collaboration, and then collaborating with people who have similar missions, like Cats for Our Skins. Actually, we had a lovely collaboration our first season. So how can we look at people who in organizations and individual artists who our missions align, and how we can weather the storm together. I don't know if Don wants to add anything to that.
No, my friend, I think you covered it all. Just that being in these collaborations has put us in a pretty good position, though, for right now to sort of continue on and work with our partners. So it gives us some flexibility that I don't know that everybody has right now. So, and we've had several people who've asked to talk to us about it, and we're happy to chat through the model and what works for us, and anything that folks need.
We do have some questions in the chat, and I just want to get that started before we're kicking ourselves off of the call. The first question actually comes from the Colonial. Should venues that need to renew their assembly permits and or certificates of inspection soon be approaching that process differently this year? Also, will there be any new electronic payment options available, since some companies are unable to issue paper checks right now?
I think we will get the answer to that for you. We will find out and we'll let you know. That's a really good question.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Cara. I think Colleen had her hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to know, is it possible, I know you talked about this last week a little bit, but it would be very helpful, I think, if we could hear a presentation on people that you've talked to, either from other states or people who are experts on this in this state, on some of the best practices in terms of moving your, or thinking about the possibility of moving your performances or a portion of your performances online. Is that something you have considered, and if not, will you consider it going forward?
Yeah, Colleen, we're happy to help bring some folks in who have experience doing that. I think, we ourselves have been learning a lot of tech lessons in real time through this. I'm sure everyone has. And so I think we're getting to a point now where we can pause and look at what's happened, what's been successful, and think about who we could bring in for that. So yeah, happy to consider.
Great. One other thing, just very quickly, have you also considered looking at what I think makes a very interesting story, and somebody correct me if I'm off base, but have you thought about going to one of the media outlets and really talking about the artist community? When I hear a story like Ash's, I went to one of her performances, and it was absolutely beautiful. You had a dancer there, at Lexi Lattimore, and it was a beautiful performance. And I think hearing the stories about artists who are in the community, performance group like the one I represent, it would be great to let people know. And I think people might be very much interested, because something like this impacts harder the artists community. Is that something you have considered? I think it would make a great piece on one of the on one of the media outlets. So
if I would love to chime in maybe a little bit on both of those comments. I know that in terms of conversations with the Actors Union, Actors Equity, they're ongoing about ways that people can stream and record and also share archival footage of shows. So those conversations are developing as we go. So we'll see how they come, how they turn out. And I also want to shout out, there have been some, I think the last comment is right on the money. It's great to get our narratives and our stories out there of what we're going through, especially to the art consumers. But in certain, I want to give a shout out to folks like Jared Bowen and other people who have done reports and interviewed myself and many of my colleagues, and putting stories out there and letting people know, our audiences and consumers know what's going on behind the stage this time.
Sure, and I think that's great too with, Jared Bowen. I just could see the fact that this group even exists is something really wonderful to talk about in the Boston arts community, and the fact that things are being done and accomplished as a result of it, and get people excited about wanting to see these groups again. So anyway,
Yeah, and I'll say, Pauline, last week we did have Cristela Guerra from the Artery talk a little bit about what's been happening on their front. And she did say if there are stories that you would like to share with her, to please email her. I'm going to put her email in the
great.
chat.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll put her email in
Okay.
the chat now. So you're
Super.
welcome to email her and let her know. And I think that's definitely something we can continue to look into for the rest of these meetings.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Maurice, everybody.
Thank you.
I think I see people have been talking about Giving Tuesday. Are there any other questions? I saw a question about bringing Boston Arts Academy to one of these sessions. I know we are doing an EdVestors remote learning session in a couple weeks, but we're definitely interested in reaching out to BAA and seeing if they have the capacity to come onto one of these calls. And I'm not sure what their schedule is. We can definitely reach out. Just putting Cristela's info in the chat.
Great. I think my other comment, based on Betsy's sharing, was, you know, we all are having different connections to young people right now, whether it's like the ICA Teen Council, or I'm thinking about like our Youth Poet Laureate, the first Youth Poet Laureate for the City of Boston, other programs that have those connections. I'm just wondering if there's something, particularly over the summer, you know, what can we do to kind of unite these different cohorts of young people who are in these programs and doing work. I'll shout out the Arts Connect International Arts Equity Summit again. There was a panel specifically about youth-related arts, and the young people on there were amazing. And it just seems like there's an opportunity there to kind of be more than the sum of our parts on that work as well, especially as, and I mentioned this last time, and it's continuing, we're just hearing so much concern over mental health, and just giving people a way to connect across some of these programs could be really interesting. I think Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture would be really happy to facilitate something that helps share and make those connections. And Ruth is saying Mass Cultural Council had a virtual convening with youth yesterday. That's great.
Yeah,
and maybe
I was
Ruth that we bring up on the call on the 11th as well.
Yeah, I was on that call yesterday, and there were definitely some conversations starting about, you know, at the organizational level about collaborating. So we would love to continue talking about that, Cara.
Great.
Awesome. We have about 3 minutes left. Any other questions people have for the group, or any specific speakers that have spoken today?
Great.
Veronica, I would love to spread this in the meeting recap email. Do you have a link or any other information you could send to me, and I'll share it to the group? I'd be happy to spread information about this May 10th event.
All right.
Deborah, you had a question above. I'm so sorry, I can't see. Could you tell us what the question is?
Deborah, there's a
Oh, sorry, Deborah. I think your microphone isn't working. It looks like your question was related to planning between the Rhode Island reopening plan and the ART, and adding to those overview guidelines. Gotcha, great, yes. So we'll be talking, ART will be with us next meeting, so it's definitely something we can totally bring up and share with the group.
Okay. Yeah, and we're still collecting any plans that are out there, venue specific, organization specific, city arts related or gathering related, to keep kind of comparing notes. For the most part, the things we've seen are so high level still that it's, it doesn't really make sense to compare or reshare quite yet. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. I feel I'm coming out of this hour much better than I was entering it. So I want to thank you all, and thanks for everyone who shared today, Maurice, Ash, and Becky. We'll see you next time.
Don't forget to please submit the snapshot survey for the arts and culture organizations. You have till 5 p.m. today. Please and thank you. We'd really appreciate it. You'll be getting it in the email in just a second. Have a great weekend, everybody.